Shields up, Iron Breakers. We're kind of here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Wolcen Lords of Mayhem on the PC. This game was released on Steam about a week ago, which means that the YouTube algorithm is going to completely destroy this video because I'm extremely late to the party. However, I am not going to ask you to hit the like button right now, but I would ask you if at any point during this video you feel like you enjoyed the information that was presented to you, you enjoyed the content. At that point, I would ask you to consider hitting the like button. If, however, you find that the content was not that great, then hit the dislike button because feedback is also important. Now, let's get to the topic at hand. What is Wolcen all about? Wolcen is an action RPG very much in the vein of something like Diablo, which I was addicted to Diablo 2 when I was younger. However, since Diablo 2, there never really was another action RPG that gripped me quite as hard as Diablo 2 did. Like, sure, I played a significant amount of Diablo 3, particularly after the Reaper of Souls update and all that jazz, but other than that, I've been to Path of Exile, and I've played other games that were action RPGs, but none of them ever really grabbed me the same as Diablo 2. And the reason why this particular bit of information is important is because in a lot of ways, Wolcen did that. Wolcen was able to grab me through just the visceral feeling of the gameplay that it had, the depth to the character customization options in terms of how much you could really tailor the build to your own preferences, and the animations, just the overall presentation quality of the game was something that I greatly enjoyed. However, it was also an experience that was tainted by a lot of problems, which I'm going to go into great detail throughout this video. Because like many other games before it, and what appears to be a troubling industry trend, Wolcen was released undercooked.
He brings that pissing over, and the big surprise is the fucking bass is fucking raw! What the fuck is going on?
Like, there's still a full game's worth of a cake in there, and you look at that cake and the cake looks great on the outside. You're just like, oh my god, I can't wait to dive into this cake. And then you pick up a knife and you start cutting into the cake, and you notice, oh my god, the core of the cake did not bake properly. It is mushy and it is soggy, and you're just like, oh man, I'm so bummed out. But then you still, you finish carving out your slice and you pick it up and you still eat it, and it still tastes good. But you're always in the back of your mind thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if this cake was actually properly baked, maybe had, a couple of more toppings. It would be just like so much better. Like, I really don't understand why everybody is rushing to release a game. It's like, just like, release it now, we'll fix it later, release it now, we'll fix it later. This is like something that has been happening a lot in the industry, and it is extremely frustrating for me because it's like, it's been a long time since I've gotten so invested into an ARPG, and I just wanted to be able to make this video and tell you guys about all of the amazing things this game has going for it. But I can't just talk about that. I have to talk about the dark sides as well. Now, usually the way I structure these videos is we start by talking about the visuals, then we talk about the sound, then we talk about the story, and then we get to the meat and potatoes, which is the gameplay. So we're going to start things off with the visuals. And from a visual standpoint, I think this game looks beautiful. I love just the art style that they are going for. I love the way that the scenarios look. I love the lighting. I love the way that the characters look. I love the armors. I love the weapons that you get, because in a lot of these games, and this is going to be something very personal to me, but in a lot of these games, whenever you get one-handed maces, you're talking about the typical flanged mace or the Morning Star or something like that. Very rarely in these games, you get a one-handed hammer that actually looks good. And this game actually has a ton of them, and I was super happy when I saw that. I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe it, they have one-handed hammers. Like, nobody does that in any game, like, ever. Nowadays, it's just like mind-blowing to me. Why does it always have to be the ugly-ass maces as opposed to actually having a proper one-handed hammer? And to top it off, the animations of the game are also really, really good. From the shooting of guns to the attacks with sword and shield to slinging spells, it all looks really good. Unless the animations happen to glitch out, which tends to happen every now and then because, like I said, the game is undercooked, and sometimes some animations play out in a more awkward way. Sometimes you'll see characters in T poses. So it's one of those things. You get the good and you get the bad. Some people might be able to play through the entire game and never experience any of the stuff that I've seen. whereas other people might see it all the friggin' time. Particularly if you're playing multiplayer, you'll be experiencing more of these bugs. Luckily, you can play offline, so this game does not force you to log into their servers and all that stuff. You can just play the entire thing offline. There's no need to interact with other human beings at all if you just want to play it solo, and that is a big plus because I know that there's a lot of people that do like that stuff. But just know that in terms of visuals, the game looks gorgeous, it animates gorgeous. The problem is that sometimes there are a couple of glitches that have sneaked through the cracks. Hopefully they'll be able to patch a lot of those out, but at the end of the day, they do happen quite a bit. There's also a lot of cutscenes in the game if you're playing in story mode, not so many if you are playing in the end game, because the end game is more about the loot grind and optimizing your character and min-maxing and all that stuff, right? But during the actual campaign, there are quite a few cutscenes that are really beautiful. Again, when they don't glitch out, because sometimes they'll glitch out and you'll see T-poses and you'll see other stuff. Again, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but it has happened to me, so I did see it. Well, let's go on to sound. The sounds were great overall. The soundtrack is pretty decent, and the voice acting, in my opinion, is pretty good.
Permission to deal with the flayers.
The clock ticks, Malis. We need to get through to engage the Brotherhood of Dawn before daybreak.
We won't make it in time if we're pinned down.
Take my children, silence the archers. The rest will march on.
Grand Inquisitor, purity and sacrifice. Siege ladder, down!
Problem is, it comes with a couple of glitches as well. Sometimes the sounds will just stop working. Sometimes the music will just stop working. Sometimes you'll just hear voice acting and you'll hear nothing else. So there's quite a few bugs there. Again, Undercooked. So when the whole thing is working, sounds great. When it glitches out, it's a real bummer, but usually just going back to the main menu and jumping back into the game works fine. So if you have an SSD, it shouldn't be much of a problem. However, if you do have a slower hard drive, you're going to be hitting a couple of loading screens here and there if these things happen to you, which happened to me, I would say, throughout my entire playthrough. And you can see this on my live streams. Throughout my entire playthrough, I probably experienced sound issues about, I don't know, 5-6 times, something like that, which is still not that much in the grand scheme of things, considering it's, I don't know, it's about 3 chapters, and it took me around, I don't know, from 6 to 10 hours per chapter. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on what happened, but, you know, it is what it is. Like I said, hopefully they'll patch some of this stuff out, but as it is right now, there are a couple of glitches here and there, but the overall performance, both from sounds and music and voice acting, everything sounds great. There's just a couple of problems when their glitches happen. So let's talk about the story, and personally, I greatly enjoyed the story. The story was actually really fun right up until the end. The end was extremely disappointing. There's a lot of really interesting themes here where they pull a lot of inspiration from stuff like Warhammer. You see, I think I saw some references to Star Wars. There's a lot of like pop culture stuff that they're pulling from, but I did enjoy the overall story right through until the end. Naturally, I'm not going to tell you guys what happens at the end because spoilers, but let's just say the game finishes on a massive cliffhanger. And I do have to criticize that because, you know, there are ways and ways to leave an open end in your game. And this, in my opinion, is one of the worst ways. And basically, after the game finishes, they fast forward everything 6 months to give you access to the end game. And there's also a problem with the story right now, which is if you are playing and you have friends that are also playing the game and you're playing this thing online, and for whatever reason you join a friend's game and that friend was further ahead in the story than you were, yeah, it's gonna skip you to your friend's position in the story, and there's no way for you to go back. At least that's the way that it worked back in the patch that I played. I don't know if they patched that stuff by now, but basically I would advise you guys, if you do get the story and you're playing with friends and you have a friend that you know is further in the story than you are, you can't join their game. They have to join yours. Otherwise, you take on their progress and you might miss out on a significant chunk of the story. As a matter of fact, that is something that happened to me on episode 5. I believe I lost about, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours of gameplay because basically I joined Dark Hero's game because I had this unique weapon that I wanted to give him. So he invited me, I joined this game, and the game just like basically set me on the same progression path that he was, which made me skip a large chunk of the game, and that was kind of bummer. But my friend Kegren told me all about what happened in between the events that I skipped, so I still know the story that took place there. I just didn't get to watch all of the cutscenes, but the cutscenes in general, I greatly enjoyed them. So, you know, it is what it is. There's bugs there. But let's talk about the meat of the game. Let's talk about gameplay. Now, gameplay is generally really good and fun. As a matter of fact, gameplay is what got me hooked. Like the way that your character animates, the way that your character plays. There's a little thing here that I do feel like I have to mention. As you guys know, I'm big into shields. I love shields. So the fact that they took the time to animate your attacks when you are playing with sword and shield, to actually include the shield in your attacks, which is something that not a lot of games actually do. It's very frustrating for someone like me that loves shields. Usually they just, whenever someone equips a shield in the game, it's just like a slab of metal that's attached to your arm and that's it. In this game, you can actually see the shield animating and doing attacks with your auto attack, and it feels really great. So that's one of the things that really got me in, like the animations and the visceral feeling of the gameplay, how it feels when you cast your skills onto the monsters. It feels really good. It feels impactful, which is something that a lot of these games are not very good at doing. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of my criticisms towards Path of Exile, for instance, which I know a lot of people are going to slam down on me for saying anything bad about Path of Exile, but it's like, look, I think Path of Exile is a fantastic game. I've played it. It's not for me. There's a lot of things in that game that don't gel with me, but one of the things that does bother me is that some of the skills don't feel like they have that great of an impact, whereas in this game, most skills really do feel impactful. At least for the character that I was playing a melee sword and shield user, and pretty much all of my abilities felt extremely impactful, and I friggin' loved it. Now, again, as with everything else in this game, there is a downside, which is sometimes the controls feel unresponsive, particularly when there's a lot of stuff happening on screen. It can become very hard for you to target specific things. Like sometimes one of my friends would die, and I would want to click on his character, and I wouldn't be able to because there would be stuff on the way, and it would just like be impossible for me to click on them. Other times I would just like be right on top of them, clicking on them, and it would just not happen. Other times there will be loot that falls on the floor, and I will click around that loot like 5 times before I'm actually able to pick it up. So something in the controls feels a little bit unresponsive, and not just, you know, the clicking or anything like that. Sometimes it's also the skills themselves. Like sometimes I'll be pressing a button like 100 times before the skill actually comes off, because there is a bit of an animation priority here. So if your character's stuck in an auto attack, the skills won't always take priority. Other times you might be stuck casting another skill, and there's something there that doesn't feel as responsive. And like I said, I've played a ton of other ARPGs. I don't usually get into them that much, but this is a problem that I haven't felt in any of those other games, with the whole unresponsiveness and skills not popping off at the right time. And then in my specific case, I use a skill called Juggernaut. Now, this is a skill that you activate once and it puts a shield around your character. Then if you activate it again, the shield explodes and deals AoE damage, right? And so what would end up happening a lot of times is, because like, okay, I'll press the button once, shield doesn't come up. I'll press the button twice, shield doesn't come up. And I'm like, God damn it, I'll spam the button, and then shield comes up and explodes instantly. And I'm like, dude, come on. It's like, it's not enough that the thing is unresponsive, then all of a sudden it's too responsive and shield just comes up and explodes. So it's a little bit frustrating there until you actually get a feel for it, and then you can kind of like go around some of these problems by like, really, okay, I need to cast my shield. Stop doing everything. And you know how hard that is to do in an ARPG. Just like, stop moving, stop clicking, stop doing everything, press that button, and now continue. You know, that's kind of like the type of stuff that you have to adapt to for some of your skills. Again, these are very niche cases here, but these are things that I've experienced throughout my playthrough, right? The other thing is that certain boss fights can also feel wonky at times. Now, in this particular game, there is something that I find very, very good about the boss fights in the end of the chapter, because in a lot of ARPGs, it's like you go through the game and you're mowing down thousands of enemies, almost like a Mushu game, right? You're mowing down demons by the millions. And then you get to the boss and you mow him down just like he's nothing. A lot of times you can just like ignore mechanics and just like burst through the boss like he's not even there. In this game, they don't really let you do that, and they don't give a damn about killing you to show you like, no, you're doing it wrong. You have to do it differently, and they'll kill you, and they have no problems with that. And that is a big win for me. Like, I love that. I love the fact that they have no qualms about just like killing players. That is a good thing. The problem is some of these boss fight mechanics can become quite wonky. Like there's a boss where he's just like spawning minions all over the place, and at the same time, I'm supposed to dodge these telegraphed attacks that the boss does. The problem is the minions have collision boxes. You can't just like run through the minions, and you can't dodge through the minions either, because this game does have a dodge button, kind of like the Diablo roll on consoles, right? You can't dodge through the minions, so in a lot of times the boss would spawn so many minions that, you know, the whole place would be crowded in minions, and you wouldn't be able to dodge the boss's killer attacks, because just like the pathing on your character would get a little bit wonky because there's too many monsters to navigate through. And I'd be like, dude, I need to move away. There's a big attack coming. And my character was like, I'll just keep going backwards on the exact opposite way you're clicking from. So, again, it's one of those things where when everything is working and, you know, when you are just playing naturally and there's no wonky shit happening, it feels fucking great. It feels visceral as hell. And it is the best feeling ARPG that I've played in a long time. However, when there is some wonky stuff going around, it can be extremely frustrating, okay? That's kind of like the overall gameplay feel that I can describe you guys. So how does it work for you to make your builds? What classes do you have? How does all that stuff work? There are no classes in Wolcen. Instead, you make your own class. Basically, you get to choose in the beginning. You can choose like spellcaster, melee, or ranged, and this just gives you your first weapon and your first skill. As you play through the game, you acquire more skills, and you can even trade these skills with your friends, so it's not like you're leveling up and you get a skill. No, you pick up the skills in the form of items, almost like the gems from Path of Exile. The difference is, in Path of Exile, you have to socket those into armor pieces and whatnot. That's another thing that I don't like. In this game, you just learn the skills once you right-click on them, and then if you pick up the same skill again, you can either give it to a friend, you can save it for a secondary character because you have like a shared stash between your characters, or you can use it again and you gain this special currency that then allows you to like respec or buy special things for your character. There's a couple of different currencies in the game. None of them is pay to win. There are no microtransactions. There is nothing of that nature. This is just like straight up single player. There's no microtransactions at all. And I believe that they did have microtransactions planned, but they ended up not putting that into their business model. It was just like, here's the game. It's a full single player game with multiplayer optional, and that's it. There's no other things, no strings attached, at least at this point, right? But basically, so you have the skills that you pick up, which, you know, some skills will be spells, other skills will be, you know, like melee abilities, other skills will be summons. There's all types of skills. I believe there's like 40 different unique skills in the game, and each of them like serves a different purpose. There's some buffing skills and whatnot, and you can have up to 5 skills once you get to endgame, but throughout, you have 5 skills throughout most of your playtime. And then once you get to the end game, you're able to unlock an additional skill. And then there's also your left click, which is also associated with the weapon that is in your right hand. So if you have like a one-handed sword or one-handed mace or an axe, you'll have one attack on your one-hander. If you have like a gun, you have a different attack on your one-hander. If you have a gun and shield, you have an even different attack. You can have like a gun and a catalyst, so you can do like rogue skills and mage skills. Basically, the weapons that you equip are going to dictate the skills that you are able to cast. And then naturally, there's also certain uniques that give you a bit more leeway in those skills. Like, for instance, there's a shield that allows you to cast sacred spells, which gives you, you know, another interesting thing to work on your specific build. Then on top of all of these skills that exist, there's also your character stats that you can level up. There are 4 stats, which is ferocity, toughness, agility, and wisdom. These stats kind of like, they're pretty self-explanatory, with the difference that ferocity is always the damage stat, regardless if you're a mage or a melee character. Wisdom is more about ailment damage, because a lot of this game is about causing ailments. Like if you're a melee, one of the big ailments for you is going to be rend, so you're going to do bleed damage. If you are a mage, one of the ailments, you're going to be able to like shock, you're going to be able to freeze, you're going to be able to do all types of elemental abilities. But yeah, those are the stats that you'll be able to invest points into. Every time you level up, you get 10 points to invest into your stats, and you can respec those at any time by paying a gold fee, in-game gold. And then there is the passive skill tree, which is going to resemble to a lot of people Path of Exile. The difference is, in here, it is comprised of 3 rings. There's the middle, the centermost ring, which is just like a circle with a bunch of skills. Then there's your second ring and your third ring, and you can rotate these around to decide the path that you are going to take to make your own class. So you essentially make your own class based around the skills that you choose to use and the passives that you you put on the tree. So you'd have passives that, for instance, could increase your chance to do ailments, or you can have passives that affect your projectiles, and these would work for both spell projectiles as well as projectiles that you do with your bow. So there is a ton of diversity in how you build, and it's actually pretty fun to try and figure out what you are going to do with your character. But then comes the downside, because for every really cool thing that this game has, there always seems to be a bit of a downside. And the main problem with all of this is the balance. There are a lot of skills a lot of passive skills in the skill tree that I was talking about that are just broken, and in more ways than one. Some of them will be broken overpowered, other of them will be broken in a way that they basically do not work. There are others even that are broken in a way that they not only don't do what it says on the tree, but they also just may invalidate your build. Like one such skill that Kegren was telling me about is that if you are a mage, or if you are like a class that doesn't have a lot of health pool, you will end up picking up pieces of armor that give you a force shield that goes on top of your health. And then there's a skill in the skill tree that allows you to gain lifesteal. And then there's another skill that allows you to transform lifesteal into force shield steel. So the idea is, instead of you leeching life from the monsters, you're leeching to this shield that you have. But apparently that particular skill would break the force shield. So every time that you would drain force shield, it would reset the points on your force shield, thus basically making you much more vulnerable. And that is something that happens with a lot of things in the tree. Like earlier, we also had a skill that I had in my build, which was giving me like, I don't know, 500% more damage or something like that, as opposed to 50% more damage. There's a lot of problems like this in the tree. The other thing is that not all logical builds are going to be viable. So for instance, maybe you're going down a specific tree because you know that you have this skill that you really like, and you're going to put all your points towards that, and it just doesn't work because the balance of the game is kind of skewed, and some skills will grossly outperform others. Like another example is, for instance, if you guys were watching my stream, you'll have noticed that I was using a skill that summons a big hammer to smash down on my enemies, and that is like one of my favorite skills in the game in terms of a visual look and a satisfying smash, because basically it just smashes, puts out a shockwave in front. It's just a very satisfying skill to use. So I was using that skill, and it was working great until I got to a boss and I started having troubles, and people were suggesting, hey, Ryu, you should try out this skill. So there's other skill that I don't like as much. It's basically like a spinning axe, which you'll probably be watching a lot of during this video. And that particular skill outperforms the hammer skill in a way that is not even remotely reasonable. Like, just forget about it. It's the same thing as you trying to shoot a BB gun when you could be shooting 10 bazookas. Like, and that's like a very conservative estimate of the difference of damage between these two skills. So I was just like, well, I mean, is that even a choice? Like, of course I'm not going to use the hammer skill. This axe skill just wrecks everything. So, it's one of those things. There are things in this game that are great, and then there are other things in this game that are a bit of a problem. Difficulty can also be something that is a little bit wonky. Like, you might be going from wrecking everything in your path, just like destroying every monster, not even struggling, not even in the slightest, to suddenly you encounter something that just one-shots you out of nowhere. And you're just like, dude, what was that? Like, that happened to me. It will also happen during boss fights for sure, because some of these boss fights are going to be like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is even happening on screen right now? I've had a lot of people coming up on stream and going like, Rurikhan, how'd you get past this boss? Like, what's going on here? And yeah, the bosses really do demand quite a bit from you. And I'm happy about that, but at the same time, I feel like the difficulty curve could be more of a curve instead of just like a straight up wall that will even potentially demand you to respec into something that's just flat out more powerful than the build that you're running, even though before you got to that boss, you weren't struggling with anything at all. So that's another problem there. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about the end game, because, I talked about the campaign. I love the story on the campaign, with the exception of the ending, which I find to be kind of cheap, the way that they just kind of like, oh, here's a massive cliffhanger, and we're not going to tell you anything about it. And I was just like, wow, okay. But once you get through the campaign, you then get to Endgame, which is like a separate game mode. Your character carries over into that game mode, and you get to go on these expeditions with modifiers. I think anyone that's played a significant amount of ARPGs will know what this is about. It's kind of like a combination between some of the map stuff that you do in Path of Exile with rifts that you do in Diablo. It's kind of an amalgamation of both of those. Like, you'll be able to find maps that will give you access to specific encounters. Like, maybe it's a boss fight, maybe it's a map that has extra chests, maybe, you know, there's a ton of stuff. Like, maybe it's a map with a bunch of loot goblins, which in this game they're like these golden bugs. They're not really called loot goblins, they're called wealth something. But, you know, you can choose to go on these maps, or you can choose to go on just expeditions that you put modifiers on, like, hey, this monster has more health, this monster type now deals lightning damage. The more modifiers you put on it, the more magic find you're going to get, which increases your chance at getting rarer gear like legendaries or uniques. And you know, the more gear of that type you get, the more powerful you are going to become. Now, while you are doing these endgame activities, you're also rebuilding the city, which is going to be a massive resource dump. So it is going to demand all of the resources that you collect throughout the game to really start building out the city. And the more stuff you build out in the city, the more quality of life you are going to get. It is through this system that you are able to unlock your final skill slot. You're able to unlock your final apocalyptic form, which is this thing that you can kind of like transform into a massive friggin' demon to start nuking stuff, which, by the way, that's another problem with balance. In my particular case, there's no advantage whatsoever to ever going into my apocalyptic form, because I deal more damage than the apocalyptic form, which makes no sense. Like, I could transform into a massive friggin' demon of worth and start destroying everything, but at the same time, I'll just deal more damage if I don't do that. So, yeah. It's a bit of a mixed bag, and I'm really sad about it, because when I first started playing, I felt like, wow, that this game is just so much fun. It's so great. All of these skills that I'm casting, it just feels fantastic. These animations that they've worked on here, and the game looks beautiful. I'm just like, wow, I'm actually getting invested in an ARPG again. It's been a long time since that has happened. So I'm super happy as I'm playing through the game. And then the more I play the game, the more the kinks in the armor start to show, the more of the shine starts falling off. And I'm just like, oh, wow, this thing is broken here. That thing is broken there. This character is T-posing. There was even a scene where there were two characters interacting with each other, but because they had been interacting in that same place at a different time, both of those versions were there. So you could see these two characters in one location, like one is wounded and the other one's like comforting it, and in the other one, both of them are up and screaming at each other, and this is all happening in the same space, and you're just like, wow. So, you know, that's the type of stuff that they missed, because again, it is only a team. I believe in their website it says they're a team of like 13 people, but yeah, man, I mean, maybe a little bit more time in the oven could have been something that would have been so much better. And I know that at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to say, so what do you think? Should I get it? It's like, I think right now the safest thing to do is wait for a couple of months, let them polish up the game some more. But yeah, you know, it is what it is. I still really enjoyed the time that I spent with the game, but I was also kind of saddened by it, because it could be so much better if they just had taken a little bit more time with it. And the way that it is, it's just like, yeah, it's an okay experience. It could have been a friggin' fantastic experience. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Wolcen Lords of Mayhem. Like I said at the start, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button. It really helps out. If you've not enjoyed this video, hit the dislike button. If you usually enjoy my content, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, and may your shields never break.